Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel BethChatsBooks. So today's video is going to be my June book haul. So over the past 2 weeks I've acquired quite a lot of physical books. I did 2 large book splurges. So some of these books have come from Amazon and some of them have come from the Waterstones website. So without further ado, I'm just going to get stuck in. So the first one I want to mention is the only one that actually hasn't arrived yet, which is The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee by David Truer. And this follows the history of the Native Americans in the United States from the 1890s to present day, I believe. So this was a contender for the BookTube Prize, but it did get kicked out in the last round of judging, which was the quarterfinals. And so it's no longer in the running for the non-fiction category in the BookTube Prize 2020. However, I was really fascinated by this book and I saw quite a few booktubers reviewing it in the latest rounds of the playlist and also the Octafinals playlist on the BookTube Prize YouTube page. And that is because it's about the Native American experience, something which I don't know so much about. I have limited experience with American history, but particularly I learned about the civil rights movement in the 60s in the US and Vietnam and American politics, and not necessarily very much about the Native American experience. So this book is a direct response to an earlier textbook that apparently was quite renowned in the US a few decades ago that discussed the event, which is Wounded Knee in the US, which I don't know much about, so I'm really sorry if I'm coming across as very ignorant. But I believe the book basically argued that that big event was the end of the Native American experience as we know it, and Truer has created this book as a response to that text and to argue that the Native American experience is still present in the modern day in the US. So I've heard it's very, very well structured, and I know it's a big chunky book, but I'm really looking forward to reading it and learning about a little bit more diverse history than I know about the American experience in particular. I just wanted to include that now because I was going to wait for that book to arrive and then do this book haul, but there's so many books and this is the first day in days where there's nobody in the house for a few hours and I've just had a relaxing bath, and I just wanted to utilise this gap of time before all the crazy arrives back in the house. So the next book I have is my auntie. Last week we were unsure whether my brother was going to have to isolate because here in the UK we're doing a track and trace system, and my brother works at the hospital and one of his colleagues had done a test for COVID and the result was that his colleague was positive for COVID. So by the track and trace system my brother was contacted, and on Friday of last week he had to isolate pending an occupational health investigation over the phone, a kind of assessment, which he passed. It was touch and go whether we would all have to isolate with him. I'd contacted my work and they had said that if he would have to isolate, that I would have to work from home for the foreseeable. So my auntie was obviously asking how things were going, and she decided to order us each a book just in case we had to isolate as a bit of a pick-me-up, which thankfully we didn't. But I ended up picking this book because I really thought it would give me boom for my book, as people say. So that is Lucy Ellmann's Ducks Newburyport. So obviously this was listed for the Man Booker Prize in 2019 and obviously we know it didn't win. Bernadine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other won alongside Margaret Atwood with The Testaments. But this was in the shortlist, and I know that Eric over at The Lonesome Reader loves this book and raves about it, and I did notice that this also was in the BookTube Prize for the fiction round for 2020, but again, a bit like The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee, it didn't make it to this round. It also got kicked out in the quarterfinals of its round. So I'm intrigued to see what this one's all about because so many people have loved it, and then this particular round where it got kicked out is where I've seen some more nuanced criticism of this. I know that this is a stream of consciousness narrative about a woman in the US who owns a bakery, and she is recovering from cancer treatment that has kind of left her family financially precarious, and I know that it is very lengthy and the font is tiny. It's over 1,000 pages and, sorry, I don't know if you can see that font, tiny. So this is a challenge. I don't think I'm going to get to this anytime soon, but I thought it would be a good use of the pennies because it is such a big chunk, and it's probably one of those books that I wouldn't have invested in myself, or if I would have tried to get it second hand, purely because I wouldn't have been able to take this out of the library, because I don't think I would have read this very well from the library, because I wouldn't have been in a rush to read it, and also you can't really read it in a rush either, so there's that one. And then the next one is Midnight in Chernobyl by Adam Higginbotham. Now this one was in the octafinals for the BookTube prize and it got kicked. When I went onto Amazon to order this one, I was really confused because there's a similar book out in the UK about Chernobyl, which I think is just called Chernobyl. And so I'd always seen that in Waterstones, but this is by an American author. But I wanted this one purely because obviously with the prize, I know that Barter Hawes himself really did rate this book, and everyone says it does a very detailed history of Chernobyl. Now, I must be the only person in the world who has not watched the series Chernobyl, which I can't remember what platform it was on now, but it is currently up for awards, I think. Everybody loved it. My mum told me to watch it. I think it was available on Sky, and at the time we were living in the old house and I didn't have access to Sky. So I'm one of the other people that didn't watch it. But I don't actually know much about Chernobyl. I know obviously of its infamy and some of the worldwide consequences from it, but I don't really know what happened. And my history of this side of Europe is very vague as well. So this will be informative for me and I'm very much looking forward to it. I'll just put that there. Then this is kind of by accident gone through the non-fictions first. It's not how I intended, but we'll go with it. So the next one is No Visible Bruises by Rachel Louise Snyder. Now this has come through as a much more compact book than I expected. For some reason I thought this was really lengthy. But anyway, this deals with domestic violence in the US. A lot of people have said that it is very, very difficult reading. I don't know if you can see the cover very well there, sorry, it's just I have terrible glare where I set up the camera. I really should change that, but it's just the easiest setup in my room. Anyway, so I know that a lot of people said it's really difficult reading. This one has gone through, I believe. Yes, so this book has gone through to the semi-finals for the non-fiction round of the BookTube Prize 2020. So I heard so many people had a very emotional reaction to this, and Barter Hawes and a few other channels did also mention it is quite difficult reading. I think the only criticism that people have said with this book is that the representation tends to be male to female violence as opposed to same-sex violence or violence in which women are the perpetrators of violence as opposed to the victims. So in that sense, it's one-dimensional, so I think some people have given criticism to that, but they said the stats are really good and it's very informative and it's just a really important read, so I'm looking forward to this one. And then the next one I bought is Columbine by Dave Cullen. So I did for the quarterfinals non-fiction and I had Parkland in my pool of books that I had to judge for that one, and I actually loved it. Unfortunately, it didn't go through, so Parkland did get kicked in the quarterfinals, and it actually ended up being my number one pick, but I can quite understand why it wasn't to everybody's taste, and I was quite pleasantly surprised that Solitary was so popular in my particular category, as well as Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, which I really enjoyed the book, but I just didn't think it would have the scope, which proves that I know nothing about non-fiction. But anyway, Solitary, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, and Underland went through. But it sparked a love and an interest in Dave Cullen's writing when I read Parkland. And Columbine is the shooting that I know the most about as opposed to Parkland, and I wanted to go back and read his first work and see how that compares. See whether the structure's similar, see whether the vibe of the book's similar. It's just something that naturally intrigued me, and I know that he is going to have a third book come out this year about two gay American soldiers, and I believe he was writing that at a similar stage to Parkland, so it'll be interesting just comparatively to see how they all work, especially since they're all non-fiction. So I don't really need to say too much about Columbine. Obviously it was the first big school shooting in the US, and it had massive repercussions going forward about how the next generation of kids dealt with precautions at school for gun violence, and it's probably more interesting to read this first and then Parkland and compare in some ways how we've moved forward and how US society has kind of evolved around the growth of school shootings. But anyway, maybe it's just me, but I'm quite excited to read this and see what it's all about. So there's that one. Then I have got Italo Calvino's Under the Jaguar Sun. So Matthew over at BethChatsBooks, who I'll link down below, we've been good friends on BookTube for a while. I haven't had a chance to check in with him as much as we did a few years ago, but I think it's because just life gets in the way. But anyway, many moons ago he recommended this book to me and said I would love it, and we've on and off teased each other about the fact that I've never really got round to reading this. So when I was doing all of this haul, I thought, do you know what, I'll go and have a look, because every time I kept looking at my library it just didn't have this in. So I took the plunge and I bought it, and it's laughable actually how short it is, so I don't know why I haven't got to this sooner. It is, I think, 90 pages? No, it says 83. So this is about a couple on a journey across Mexico who are excited by the idea of a particular ingredient suggested by ancient rituals of human sacrifice. So it sounds quite epic and a little bit saucy there. I kind of want to go into this blind anyway and see how I like it, but it was recommended to me, so I'm going to see how that goes. Also, so many people have raved about this author Calvino, so I'm just glad to finally get introduced to this author, and potentially this is a gateway to read more books by this author. And the next two are kind of a link. So that is Red Snow by Will Dean and Black River by Will Dean. So I read from the library Dark Pines a good few months back, and I always wanted to read the second one, Red Snow, which I hunted and hunted for at the library, and it just wasn't there. I thought it would be there because Dark Pines was there. In fact, there was multiple copies of Dark Pines. And so I thought when I was ordering a few books, I'd check on the progress of this. Turns out Red Snow's come out, and since then Black River. So this is book 3 and this is book 2. So this follows a character called Moodysson. So this is set in Sweden, and it follows Tuva, who is a death journalist turned detective, if I remember correctly. She kind of gets embroiled in the very first book with this case, and it seems like this one is having a similar case to the first one. So it says 2 bodies, 1 suicide, 1 cold-blooded murder, 2 coins. Licorice coins cover the murdered man's eyes. 2 weeks. A blizzard is moving into the small town of Gavrik. Residents already terrified feel increasingly cut off. Tuva, a reporter on the local paper, has just 2 weeks to track down the killer before she leaves town for good. But will the ferryman let her go? So yeah, she's a journalist for a local paper, but she kind of always gets embroiled in the detective side of the story. So I thoroughly enjoyed Dark Pines. I loved that Nordic crime thriller element. I think Tuva is a really exceptional character. She's really interesting and multifaceted and nuanced. So it was one of these series that I really wanted to get to, especially because I don't actually read enough series. I read a lot of standalones, and I love thrillers and mystery books. And so I wanted to get into more crime genre style series. So when I saw these, I thought I should get back to that because I remember loving Dark Pines. So there's this one, and obviously Black River, which it just says here, 1 kidnapping, 1 liar, 1 chance. Tuva's been living in southern Sweden for 4 months when she receives horrifying news. Her best friend Tammy Yamnim has gone missing. So obviously the story leads on from this one, but really excited to get to it. I remember loving the Robert Galbraith series that I've recently read about a year ago, or towards the beginning of this year. I finished the last one, and it's a shame with everything that's happening with J.K. Rowling, because Harry Potter has a very important place in my heart, and I really loved the Robert Galbraith crime series, but I think her opinions and her tweets on transgender issues and transgenderism is just really ignorant, and I think she's handled it really badly. But I could do a whole other video on separating author from their works and how I feel about that and how I feel about her tweets, but we're going to park it there for the sake of this video. So the next ones I'm just going to quickly mention, because you will see plenty of these in upcoming videos when I've read and reviewed them for the BookTube prize. So this is the category that I'm judging for the quarterfinals. I have The Innocents by Michael Crummy that I've already read, and I have Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, which I've also already read. But these are the other books that I'm going to be reading. The Night Tiger by Yan-C Chu. I've mentioned this in my vlog, which will come out once the reviews for this are over, so I'm not actually going to tell you anything about these particular books because I'm just going to get through them. So there's that one. The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. Can't really see how pretty that gold writing is there, it's just terrible there. The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. And A Single Thread by Tracy Chevalier. So that's that one. And then I've also acquired Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. Now, I really want to get to this because I loved Everything I Never Told You, the first book that came out by this author, and everybody says that this one's really interesting, and I've noticed that, is it Hulu have done a series? Reese Witherspoon has been behind this, about this story, and I really want to get around to watching that at some point. So I think if I read it first, it makes it better, doesn't it? So it says, in the placid progressive suburb of Shaker Heights, everything is meticulously planned, from the colour of the houses to the successful lives its residents will go on to lead. And no one embodies this spirit more than Eleanor Richardson. Mia Warren, an enigmatic artist and single mother, arrives in this idyllic bubble with her teenage daughter Pearl and rents a house from the Richardsons. Soon Mia and Pearl become more than just tenants. All four Richardson children are drawn to the alluring mother-daughter pair, but Mia carries with her a disregard for the rules that threatens to upend this carefully ordered community. Sounds brilliant, and I know so many people actually prefer this one to Everything I Never Told You, so I'm excited for this one. Since I bought A Single Thread by Tracy Chevalier for my BookTube judging, I thought I might as well buy Girl with a Pearl Earring, which is one of her more famous works of fiction. I think this story follows a young girl who gets embroiled in a relationship with an artist who thinks that she could become a good muse for a painting, and the artist gives her his wife's pearl earrings and makes an iconic painting, and the repercussions of that. So I don't actually know any more than that for this, but I'm pleasantly surprised on how small it is. For some reason I've just always had the perception that this is a big book, which is a lie. So there's that. Then I've also got Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Now, a lot of people who like crime and thriller have always recommended Ruth Ware to me on a lot of videos of channels that I watch, but also a lot of people in general have said to me, you'd really like Ruth Ware. I've never read any Ruth Ware, and this is one of her more famous works, Turn of the Key, which is meant to be a reimagining of Turn of the Screw, I believe. So this one says, when Rowan comes across the advert, it seems too good to be true, a live-in nanny position with extremely generous salary. What she doesn't know is that she's stepping into a nightmare, one that will end with the child dead and her in a cell awaiting trial for murder. She knows she's made mistakes, but she's not guilty, at least not of murder, which means someone else is. So a bit of a page turner. I want to get into Ruth Ware and see if I would like these kind of books, because I know she's got a back catalogue. So we'll see how I get on with this one. And again, relatively short. And then the next one is The Mystery of Henry Pick by David Foenkinos. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I am really bad at pronunciation, just naturally. So this one is probably responsible for the entire haul because I was listening to a podcast, the Waterstones podcast, I actually believe, which all makes a lot of sense now. It was talking about Walter Presents, the series that's been really famous on Channel 4. And the main presenter on the Waterstones podcast, I can't remember his name off the top of my head now, which is really bad because I listen to it all the time. But he was interviewing Walter, who's responsible for Walter Presents on Channel 4. And he's decided to have a partnership with Waterstones in which he's recommending translated fiction as a gateway for more Waterstones readers to read diversely. So this is going to be a series, I believe, of translated fiction that Walter Presents is cherry picking. So on the back it's got quite an interesting little playful formatting and style of the cover at the back, where it says made in France, so it's a French book, category whodunit mystery, contains Paris, intrigue and desire. So I think this is going to be, the cover is stunning, and I think it's going to be part of a collection that they've worked really hard to make this accessible, so that hopefully a lot of people who want to get into translated fiction can follow this and collect the series and acquire new reads. So this is on my radar to keep following, really, because I really want to work on reading more translated fiction, more classics from diverse voices. So I want to read more classics from Europe. For example, I was talking to my mum the other day. I haven't read any Russian literature. I also haven't read many just British classics, which I would like to get to, but I want to read more diverse translated literature. I'm trying to follow the International Booker Prize now to give me some gateway books to get into translated fiction and see what I like. So I've been following that, and I'm trying to slowly acquire those books. So I think this is a really accessible way for dummies like me who really need to get into translated fiction but don't know where to start. So if anybody's got any recommendations for translated fiction, and that can be as diverse as you want. I've in the past loved books like The Vegetarian by Han Kang, which was a translated fiction from the Korean. So as diversely as possible, but if there's any recommendations of any translated fiction and a beginner's guide to where to start, maybe of some that you've really liked and enjoyed, then please leave a comment in the comment section down below, because as a book lover and a bibliophile, I love any kind of book recommendations. It's just exciting. So anyway, let me see if I can tell you what this book is about. I believe it is also a book for book lovers. It's about love of bookshops and libraries and the written word. Yes, so it says an obscure library in the unassuming French town of Crozon houses duty manuscripts rejected by publishers and a masterpiece waiting to be discovered. Visiting while on holiday, young editor Delphine Despero experiences little from this collection of faded dreams, but within minutes of starting the last hours of a love affair, she knows she must bring the novel to Paris to publish it. So it's meant to be funny and engaging, and I'm really looking forward to getting to this book at some point. And then we're finally getting there. The next book is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I feel like I'm the only person in the world that has not got round to reading this book. Everybody loves this book, raves about this book. So many videos of people's favourite books of all time, this one features. So I read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt a few years back, really enjoyed that book, but everyone says this one's the best. And I've always been playing around in my mind with whether I get it or I wait for it or I take it out of the library. And because of COVID, the decision was made for me. I just got a second-hand copy on Amazon. So this follows some classics students in a New England college who, from the very beginning of the novel, we find out they've murdered one of their friends or colleagues or student contemporaries. And we kind of start the book with knowing, but it's not a whodunit, it's a whydunit, I believe. Kind of we go back and learn about these characters and why, and it interweaves interesting developments. I think I would really love this because it kind of sounds quite similar in some ways to the threading of the virgin suicides, in the sense that we know from the very beginning the girls commit suicide, but we see through the lens of these people, these boys who were besotted with them and obsessive about seeing them and studying them from afar, what happened. And this seems a bit like, through these really intimate relationships between one another, we're going to find out why this weird situation occurred. So I can't wait to read this. I also didn't realise how thick it is. I should have realised from reading The Goldfinch that it was going to be chunky, because some authors just like writing chunky books. And if you can write as well as Donna Tartt, then fair enough. But this is 630 pages, which I was not expecting. Everyone says that you fly through this book, so I think the book will be picked up when I need a fast-paced, immersive, escapist, slightly dark read in my life. So there's that one. And then I have Catch and Kill by Rowan Farrow. I believe this one has also gone through to the BookTube Prize quarterfinals. I'm sure it has. A lot of people really appreciated this book, so this one was vying for attention on the BookTube Prize between this one and She Said in the octafinals round for non-fiction, and I think it was quite unanimous that people thought this was a better book. Now, both of them deal with the topic of the Weinstein controversy and about his fall from grace in Hollywood. So I don't actually know who Rowan Farrow is, but apparently he has connections with the underbelly and associated people in Hollywood. So let's have a little look. In 2017, a routine network television investigation led Rowan Farrow to a story only whispered about. One of Hollywood's most powerful producers was a predator, protected by fear, wealth, and a conspiracy of silence. As Farrow drew closer to the truth, shadowy operatives, from high-priced lawyers to elite war-hardened spies, mounted a secret campaign of intimidation, threatening his career, following his every move, and weaponizing an account of abuse in his own family. So everyone says that this is really engaging and really highlights the #MeToo movement, how it develops, how he's basically dethroned Weinstein as this hero, this legendary figure, to the disgusting pervert that he is. So I think it'll be interesting from this perspective. I know that She Said followed the two journalists who broke the story for the New York Times. I believe it was the New York Times. But this apparently was just a better constructed non-fiction narrative. So considering I don't really know much about what happened, apart from that he was a very bad person, I think reading this will be very informative to me on this topic, and I'm really trying to get into more non-fiction, so having the non-fiction round for the BookTube Prize this year has really helped widen my spectrum of non-fiction and give me built-in recommendations, which, like this book, I hope will educate me on these different niche topic areas of non-fiction as well. So there's that one. And then another BookTube non-fiction pick, which has definitely gone through to the semi-finals. I know it has. I'm pretty sure that this one has as well, but I know this one has. Is The Only Plane in the Sky, The Oral History of 9/11 by Garrett M. Graff. Now, a lot of people have said that this is very difficult reading, and I know a lot of people have read it via audiobook, so listened to it more than read it, and found that was really helpful. Obviously, this is quite an interesting look because it's just a compilation of people's oral narratives, and I know that a lot of people mentioned at the end of the book he references a lady who really helped him, a lady called Jenny Pachuki, who's an oral historian who was responsible for compiling all of these narratives and making sense of them and trying to make them chronological, because apparently this does try to go through the chronological breakdown of the day, which would be a very difficult task to do when you've got so many oral histories to compile and to kind of make them fit inside the puzzle piece. So while some people gave this book criticism for the fact that he didn't really allow Pachuki to be co-author. She's just kind of mentioned in the acknowledgements. I think that a lot of people think this book is really important, even if there's limitations to the fact as well that this book is a compilation of oral narratives. Some people think that makes this whole book more powerful in that sense, because it's the direct words of, and we know that to get the direct words of people, these are also survivors, so that has that kind of punch to the gut as well to the whole narrative. So I'm actually surprised how bloody big this book is. So I know there's a lot of notes. So it's over 400 pages. It's just maybe the way that this American style of publication is, because it's a bigger chunky. It just feels really chunky. But yeah. And it seems to have pictures in it as well, which is always good. I like having a picture. So basically, for me, I did live through this technically, but I was a very young child. I was 5. And I say to my dad, this is what a lot of people class as a traumatic memory, and one that through psychology I've learned it's almost a snapshot memory because of the enormity of it. So a lot of events like this, Princess Diana dying, traumatic events become ingrained in the brain, and that's always fascinated me, particularly with this, because I have no memory of this event. A lot of people here in the UK say I remember seeing it on the news, but at 5 I don't have any memories, but I don't have any full cohesive memories of being 5 anyway. So in a weird way this fascinates me, because it's within touching distance of my own experience, but really so far removed, and I want to know more about what really happened on that day. So this will be really engaging for me. So there's that one. And the last book I have to show you is The Existence of Amy by Lana Grace Reaver. So the author Lana kindly sent this in the post for me. She emailed me and asked if I'd be interested in reading this book, which I am. So I do want to try and read more self-published works. I have a few on my shelves that I haven't got around to reading yet, so I think maybe 1 month I might dedicate a month to trying to read those and review them, because I think it's really important that if the author's taken the time and energy to send me a book, that I read it and then try and get a review out there. So this book says on the blurb, Amy has a normal life, that is, if you were to go by definition of no obvious indicators of peculiarity, and you didn't know her very well. She has good friends, a good job, a nice enough home. This normality, however, is precariously plastered on top of a different life, a life that is Amy's real life, the only one her brain will let her lead. So I just thought it sounded quite intriguing. I think it's going to be contemporary, and it's going to deal with Amy coming to terms with the juxtaposition between how she feels about herself and how she projects that to the outside world. So I'll be getting to this at some stage. So that's all the books I wanted to show you for this very long June book haul, but I'm looking forward to diving into these books and having a good old time. I'm going to be reading my BookTube Prize reading this month, and hopefully I'll whiz through it this month and then I can focus on reading some of my newly acquired books. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.